So, the other day I was playing Halo Wars 2, and while Isabella was giving the Spirit of Fire the speech and information about who the Banished are and who is Atriox, I kinda realized she made a mistake, specifically this one line right here.
The Covenant had two targets in those years: humanity and Atriox. They almost got us. But Atriox, they never came close. The whole damn Covenant couldn't contain him at the height of their power.
Well, first things first, I lied. It wasn't just one line, it was a couple of lines. But regardless, Isabella was still wrong about the Banished. Her notion that the Banished were this unstoppable force that the Covenant couldn't stop basically forced us to think the exact same thing, when in reality, it wasn't the case. So that's what we're gonna look at today. How Isabella's notion of the Banished forced us to think that the Banished were this unstoppable force. Let's get started. Now, to understand why Isabella is wrong, we have to look at this not from the perspective of the UNSC, but through the perspective of the Covenant. The Covenant Empire is thousands of years old. It was formed by two species, the Prophets and the Elites. After that, any other species that they encountered was forced to join. Some of them did in fact join willingly, but the majority were forced to join them. And after a couple hundred years, a hierarchy was made, where basically the Prophets were the leaders, the Elites were second in command, and after that, anyone else. But how does this relate to the Banished and why Isabella is wrong? Have patience, young one, we will get there eventually. It's important to know the history of the Covenant to understand why Atriox was never an actual threat to the Covenant. During its long history, and the history that we know of the Covenant were good at three things. Number 1, forcing a new species to join them. Number 2, finding Forerunner technology and somewhat reverse engineering it. And number 3, putting down rebellions. Because the Covenant forced so many species to join them, it makes sense that they would have rebellions. And the Covenant became really good at putting down rebellions. All the species within the Covenant have rebelled at one point or another. Most of these are very short-lived and do not accomplish anything, but some of them are actually somewhat successful. One of the most famous ones is the Grunts Rebellion. At the end, the Elites saw and respected the Grunts more, giving them armor and weapons when they went into battle. But of course it came at the cost of glassing their homeworld. Because most species were forced into the Covenant, each species at one point or another did in fact try to rebel. Grunts, Jackals, even Sankili, aka Elites. Remember, the title of Arbiter before was a title of high honor within the Elites, but then one Arbiter challenged the Prophets, challenged the Covenant, and since then it became a title of shame. Until recently, the Arbiter that we know brought back the honor that the title held. But why does this matter? Simple, the Covenant is excellent at putting down rebellions. So Atriox, a rebel or a pirate, whatever you want to call him, was never actually a threat for the Covenant. Remember, the Banished were created a few years before the Human Covenant War ended. Specifically, the Banished were created in 2549, 4 years before the end of the Human Covenant War. The Human Covenant War ended officially in 2553 when they finally signed the treaty. Some people will say that it was in 2552 in the Battle of the Ark, but that's incorrect. Well, this is something else that Isabella got wrong. She gives the notion that the Banished were created at the very start of the Human Covenant War, and during the time of the Human Covenant War, the Covenant were unable to stop Atriox, when in reality it was only in the last 4 years. And during these 4 years, from the little information that we have, Atriox and the Banished never attacked any significant Covenant force. Instead, they relied themselves on attacking remote Covenant outposts and simply stealing their vehicles and weapons. The only time that we know of that Atriox and the Banished attacked a significant force was against human settlements, like the one that we see when Isabella is talking about the Banished and Atriox. Atriox was smart and knew that if he attacked with force, the Covenant would simply send one of their fleets to destroy him. So instead, he basically became a pirate. He became the warlord that we know him after the fall of the Covenant. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what about his fleets? Surely all those dreadnoughts that we see formed part of his fleet during the Covenant-Human War, and especially during those 4 years. Well, that's another mistake. Most of those dreadnoughts, well actually all of his dreadnoughts, were built in the year 2553. That's right, they were built when the treaty between humanity and the Covenant was signed. In other words, all those dreadnoughts that we see the Banished have were built because the Covenant had fallen. They did not exist during the 4 years when Atriox was a pirate in the remote sectors of the galaxy. And during those 4 years, the one ship that we know he had was a simple assault carrier that he was able to convince the shipmaster to join the Banished, the same assault carrier that we see during the events of Halo Wars 2. But one thing still doesn't make sense. Isabella said that the Covenant were unable to contain Atriox at their height of their power. Well, this is also a lie, and somewhat true at the same time. The one and only time that we know the Covenant actually did try to stop Atriox was when he first turned against them. The fleet that he was assigned to when he betrayed them was also assigned with capturing him, and as we know, he allowed himself to be captured so that he could convince the shipmaster of the ship that captured him to turn against the Covenant and join him, which we know he was able to do. From there, Atriox only had one ship, the Enduring Conviction, and the Covenant never really tried to stop Atriox after that. And why would they? They had two enemies at that point. They had an enemy that could actually destroy what the Covenant stood for, that could destroy its hierarchy. Humanity. Humanity was a bigger threat to the Covenant that Atriox ever was, even if he was attacking remote outposts and stealing vehicles. Humanity had the power to simply destroy the Covenant within itself, if anyone discovered the truth, which did in fact happen. But I know what you're thinking. Where's the evidence that supports this? Where's the evidence that the Covenant truly did not think Atriox a threat? Well, simple. Let's go back to Halo 2. Back to the first mission that the Arbiter took. It was to eliminate a heretic, Cesar Refume. This heretic only had under his command a group of elites, and a couple of grunts and jackals. Yet, the Prophet deemed him worthy enough to send an Arbiter after him and special forces. Keep in mind that he was stuck on a mining platform and nothing more. He had no way of leaving the system, and was simply broadcasting the truth to the rest of the Covenant about what the Forerunners are and what the Covenant was actually believing in. Yet, the Prophets deemed him so dangerous that they had to send an Arbiter towards him. Yet, according to Isabella, Atriox was unstoppable and they couldn't contain him. But for some reason, the Prophets deemed this elite heretic more dangerous than Atriox, enough to actually hunt him down and eliminate him. Why? Simply because he was telling the truth. He was speaking the truth of the Forerunners and what the Covenant believed in. So you have to think about it this way. Atriox with a ship, attacking remote Covenant outposts and human settlements, was not deemed a threat to the Covenant and to the Prophets, that they never sent anyone after him. Yet this one heretic elite, who was simply speaking the truth, was deemed so dangerous that they had to send an Arbiter after him. And thanks to 343 Guilty Spark talking to the elite heretic, we know that most arbiters are chosen when an elite is gaining too much power within the Covenant and they need to eliminate him. And so I ask you, what would be more dangerous? Sending the arbiter to a random mining platform full of elite heretics, or sending him to fight a full assault carrier with a pirate warlord on it? Which one would guarantee the death of that elite? The answer becomes quite obvious. The Covenant had so many resources at its disposal that eliminating Atriox and his one ship would have been quite easy. And you might be saying, maybe Atriox is such a warrior, such a tactician, that sending any ships after him would probably cause in their destruction, and they didn't want to lose those ships, which is a valid point. But we also have evidence that that's not the case. You see, Atriox is an amazing warrior and soldier, but he's a really bad tactician, at least when it comes to conventional warfare. He specialized in guerrilla warfare, no pun intended. Once Atriox and the Banished fight against an equal foe in a conventional war, it becomes quickly obvious that they're not very good at it. A great example of this would be basically Halo Wars 2. In it, you are fighting the leader, Atriox, and you are able to defeat him in a conventional war, destroying his one ship that he had in the area, killing a lot of his crew, and killing one of his high-ranking lieutenants. At the end, he basically starts bargaining with you so that you could leave the Ark and let him be in peace. Funny enough, in the books, once Atriox leaves the Ark and leaves the Banished forces under the command of the shipmaster, the Banished forces actually become a threat to the UNSC Spirit of Fire and to the Covenant forces that are also in the Ark. Now, I know what you're going to say. What about when they were able to bring down the UNSC Infinity? Well, this battle is actually highly debated, simply because we don't know how the Banished were able to bring down the UNSC Infinity. According to books and other source material, the most logical conclusion is that the Banished ambushed the UNSC Infinity. Once again, they relied on guerrilla warfare, their specialty, to bring down humanity's most powerful ship. It is also theorized that the ship was heavily undercrewed when the Banished attacked them, simply because at this point they were running away from Cortana. So basically, the Banished faced the UNSC Infinity, which only had a skeleton crew at best. And even then, they had to ambush the ship to guarantee a victory. I want to go back to Atriox, simply because while I was doing this video, I also realized that Atriox never fights anyone who has a similar combat skill to him in a direct fight. And honestly, that's quite smart. If I was in his position, I would also do what he does to guarantee a victory, especially if I know they could kill me. Let's go back to the two fights that we know he has engaged in against opponents of similar combat skill to him or superior combat skill. The first one and most obvious is obviously Red Team. Atriox ambushes them and actually uses one of them as a shield for a little bit to guarantee that the others don't shoot him. But in this fight, it was a complete ambush towards Red Team. Getting a drop on a Spartan is especially impressive, and I'm not gonna deny that. But he did not fight on even terms. But once again, I completely give him that. If I was facing a Spartan team, I will do whatever I need to guarantee a victory and survive. So him facing 3 Spartan 2s, even if they were wearing old Mjolnir armor, is still impressive that he was able to ambush them and injure one of them. But again, it was an ambush. It wasn't a direct fight. Let's go on to the second fight that we know, and that is against Master Chief. While it was a short fight, Master Chief was already on high alert, and he was eliminating Banished forces. And then Atriox snuck up behind him and delivered the first hit on him. And after this, because Master Chief is already in combat, he is quickly able to counter Atriox's next attack. From there, Atriox quickly subdues Master Chief and throws him into the void of space. Now, here is my theory as to why he does this, and he doesn't allow Master Chief to fight him in a 1v1. Simply because Atriox knows that he lost the element of surprise now, and fighting Master Chief could actually lead to his death. So instead of risking it, he simply throws him to the void of space. Which does help explain why he let Red Team go after injuring one of them. He realized that the other 2 Spartans were already on high alert and ready to fight him, so him engaging with the other 2 Spartans would have probably caused his death. Another evidence to support this is found inside of a book. Atriox and the Arbiter actually meet at the end of this book, and the Arbiter simply tells him, "Let's end this here and now," or something along those lines, basically telling Atriox to fight him in a 1v1 in a duel. Atriox does not engage the Arbiter and simply leaves. Some people have said that Atriox had nothing to gain by killing the Arbiter right there and then, and because he had nothing to gain, there was no point in fighting the Arbiter. But that makes completely no sense. Killing the Arbiter would have caused so much confusion within the Swords of Sangheili that I believe that it's actually worth the risk. Again, this is just my theory. Eliminating the Arbiter would have weakened them and allowed the Banished to conquer them, and would have added more elites to their forces. But Atriox decides not to fight the Arbiter. And why? Once again, this is just my theory. He knows that the Arbiter could easily kill him, or it would be a difficult fight that at the end Atriox would lose. Again, all the fights that we have seen from Atriox have been in ambush tactics. Never has he fought an opponent with equal combat skill to him or superior in a 1v1. This would actually help explain why he let Red Team go. It would make no sense to let 3 Spartans live. Eliminating a Spartan, that simply letting them escape makes absolutely no sense. So I think we have seen enough evidence that supports that Isabella was wrong in her description of the Banished. But I want to add just one more thing. Let's go back to the perspective of the Covenant. We know the Human Covenant War started in 2525 and ended in 2553, and the Banished were formed in the last 4 years of the Human Covenant War, that's to say 2549. So they were active for only 4 years before the fall of the Covenant Empire. But we have to keep one more thing in mind. During those 4 years that the Banished was formed and active, the Covenant wasn't simply fighting humanity. In the last 2 years of the Human-Covenant War, the Covenant had found Halo, and their attention focused completely on them. They believed, the prophets and the rest of the Covenant, that the Great Journey was close at hand, and now we have to think about this. Why would they worry themselves with a pirate who only has one ship, who couldn't possibly pose a threat to them? When they were so close to ascend, they wouldn't even have considered Atriox a threat or someone that could oppose them, because they were so close to ascending and becoming what they believed the Forerunners wanted them to be. So during those last 2 years, their full focus was on the Halo rings. So I'm 100% sure that Atriox didn't even enter their mind. They were only a true nuisance in the first 2 years. And even then, that's a stretch, simply because, as we mentioned before, the Covenant probably didn't even think them worthy or didn't even actually try to stop him. We also have to remember that during these last 2 years of the Human-Covenant War is when the Great Schism happened, meaning that the Covenant Empire entered into what we would know as a civil war. In other words, they would even have cared less about Atriox at this point. So overall, Isabella's description of the Banished makes absolutely no sense and was 100% wrong. But why was this? Well, we have to remember that Isabella is not a military AI, so it kind of makes sense that to her, anyone who opposed the Covenant and survived would seem like a threat. But when you actually dive in and analyze the situation, the Banished were really nothing special. Were not even a threat to the Covenant, and the Covenant didn't even consider them that. But that's an in-game, in-universe explanation as to why the Covenant never tried to stop Atriox, and we only found out about them during the events of Halo Wars 2. From an outside universe perspective, it's simple to say that it's simply because the Banished didn't exist or weren't even an idea during the creation of the original Halo trilogy and the following games. So it makes sense that they weren't even mentioned during the main timeline that we know. But that's it for me, guys. What do you guys think? Tell me if I got something right, if I got something wrong, or if everything that I said was complete BS. I completely accept that. Remember to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.